In Chapter 48 of the Yinks manga, we will see that Mr. Choi, the owner of the King Gym to which Yaekyoung's next opponent belongs, looks for Dan and offers to get his grandmother a new treatment. But in exchange, he must give him information about Yaekyoung. Of course, Dan rejects the offer. He wants to tell Yaekyoung about this matter, but since he continues to ignore him, he doesn't dare. Someone sends Yaekyoung photos of Dan meeting with Mr. Choi. The chapter begins with Dan walking towards the gym. He sees that the same unknown number that has called him those last few days is calling him. He remembers that the doctor told him that he should accept that his grandmother is going to die. He wonders how he does that. He says that he doesn't know what he has lived for until now. When he is about to enter the gym, a man calls him. Dan asks him who he is. The man tells him that he has been calling him several times and has also sent him messages text, but he didn't answer him. Dan apologizes, but tells him that he doesn't usually read text messages. The man gives him his card and tells him that he is Choi Gil-seok, owner of the King Gym, that he is glad to have finally met him, that he hopes that his visit does not bother him, since he should have warned him in advance. But since there was no way to contact him, he had no other choice. He flatters him by assuring him that he is very handsome. He asks her if he has time so they can chat for a while. He tells her that he would like to invite her to dinner at a very good restaurant nearby. Dan thanks him but tells him no, he has to leave. Mr. Choi follows him and begs him to talk to him. He tells him that there is a reason why he has been calling him. Dan stops when the man tells him that he knows that his grandmother is very sick. Dan turns around and, surprised, asks him how he knows. Mr. Choi tells him that he knows very well how he feels because he also lost his mother to an illness, and that he has something to tell her about that matter. He asks if he could give him a moment. Later we see that Mr. Choi has taken Dan to a coffee shop. He tells him that he is the owner of the building and decided to rent that place for that coffee shop because they have the best coffees. Dan asks him how he knows about his grandmother, if he investigated it or something like that. Mr. Choi lies to him that he didn't do it. He tells him that people in the sector have told him a little about him because he was curious. He assures that because this industry is very small, everyone knows each other, and everyone knows what a good physical therapist he is. He tells him that as he knows, Yoonmin and Yaekyoung are going to compete soon, which is an honor for them, but he also feels a lot of pressure because they don't have much experience. That's why he wanted to ask him if he has any advice on how to take care of athletes. Dan in his mind says that this man does not inspire confidence. He asks him if that is really the reason for his visit. He asks him to tell him the truth. Mr. Choi tells him that it is fine, that he will speak bluntly, that he would like to hire him to work at his gym, that he wants him to be Yoonmin's physiotherapist. He offers to pay him double his current salary as well as give him free accommodation in Gangnam and a car of any model he wants. Dan asks him why he would want to hire him. Mr. Choi tells him that he won't find an offer as good as that anywhere else, that they give it to him because they know that he is the best. Dan tells him that he doesn't need any of that. Furthermore, there are many better physiotherapists than him. He apologizes, but says that he must leave. Suddenly Mr. Choi tells him that there is a new medicine that his grandmother could try, so Dan is surprised. Mr. Choi tells him that he knows that the hospital has told him that there is no longer a remedy, and that is because no medicine imported into the country has worked. But he tells him that an American pharmaceutical company recently released a new drug against cancer, and apparently it is very effective. He says that it is available there, but in Korea it will take years to test it and authorize its sale. That is, it is a drug that Korean patients cannot use no matter how much they want to. Dan thinks about his grandmother. Mr. Choi mentions to him that the pharmaceutical company is the parent company of the agency that owns the King Gym. So he assures him that he can get his grandmother to receive the treatment in the United States through contacts. He offers to pay the treatment also if he agrees to work with them. Dan doesn't know what to do. Mr. Choi tells him that if changing jobs seems like too much of a commitment, then they have another proposal, which can give him information about Yaekyoung. Dan gets scared. The man tells him that he only has to share the history of Yaekyoung's injuries and the strategy for the next fight, which in exchange will help his grandmother receive the treatment. He asks her what she thinks. He tells her that it is a good deal. Dan squeezes his hands because he is upset. Mr. Choi takes his hands and tells him that he only makes him that offer because he thinks he deserves it. He asks him to consider it and call him when he decides. Dan thinks about his grandmother and Yaekyung. He feels at a crossroads. At dusk, Yaekyung arrives home. Dan is working on his computer and hears noise, so he knows that Yaekyung has returned. He says that he has returned very late, that it is almost 12 o'clock, so he must be exhausted. That he will go to give her a massage to relax, and in the process he will tell her what happened in the afternoon. He goes to the living room and finds Yaekyung watching a video of Yoonming's fight. He apologizes for interrupting him. Yaekyung gets scared since he didn't hear him coming. He asks him what's wrong. Dan asks him if he wants him to give him a massage before he goes to sleep. He tells him that this way he will relax and sleep better, and he also has something to tell him. Yaekyung tells him that another time, that he is busy now. Dan tells him that he will leave then. He says in his mind that maybe it is a bad idea to tell Yaekyung now because he doesn't want to distract him. He is sad that his beloved continues to ignore him. In a flashback, we see that he freed himself from Mr. Choi's grip and told him that he didn't even need to think about it, that no matter how much he offered him, he would never betray Yaekyung. Mr. Choi was very surprised. He asked him if he would really reject that offer. Dan asked him to never contact him again, and he prepared to leave the place. Mr. Choi began to curse. He shouted at him that he would regret it while he was leaving. Dan in his mind said that first the man brings up the subject of his grandmother and then asks him to sell information about Yaekyung, that he is a blackmailer of the worst and most brazen nature. He reproached himself for having agreed to talk to him. Back in the present, Dan says in his mind that it's better not to worry Yaekyung unnecessarily with that matter, although he sure wouldn't mind if he accepted the offer and left, since he's invisible to him anyway. He says goodnight to Yaekyung and leaves. He says in his mind that he will tell her another day. Yaekyung continues analyzing Yoonming's fight. Suddenly he receives a message. He sees that a hidden number has sent him photos of Dan meeting with him. Mr. Choi, which Yaekyung doesn't like at all. He recognizes Mr. Choi as the owner of the gym where Yoonming belongs. Well friends, that's all for today's video. Bye.